she asked for a break because of a new guy at work. So I gave her exactly what she wanted. I gave her an entire city of space between us. I blocked her, packed my life into a suitcase, and moved hundreds of miles away without a word. Now, a year later, she's found me, and she's the one crying about closure. This is why I refused to speak to my ex. I never thought I would become the kind of person whose life could be turned into a story people listened to while driving alone at night, or lying awake with the ceiling fan humming softly above them, feeling that quiet ache that comes from recognizing yourself in someone else's pain. I always believed those stories belonged to people who missed obvious warning signs, people who ignored red flags, people who somehow brought chaos upon themselves. For a long time, I believed I was different. I'm 34 years old now, and when I look back, what haunts me most isn't how everything ended, but how normal everything felt right before it did. How safe. How settled. How convincing the illusion of stability can be when you want it badly enough. I met Eva at work, in the most unremarkable way imaginable. Same building, different departments, overlapping projects. We weren't introduced by friends or thrown together by fate. We just happened to sit in the same meeting one afternoon that dragged on far too long, exchanging the same tired looks whenever management repeated itself. When it finally ended, we walked out together and laughed quietly in the hallway, the kind of laugh that isn't meant to impress anyone, only to release tension. That moment didn't feel important at the time. It felt easy. And ease, I would later learn, can be far more dangerous than intensity. We started talking after that. Coffee breaks turned into lunches. Lunches into long walks after work where either of us seemed eager to go home. Conversation with Eva didn't require effort. She listened carefully, remembered details, asked questions that made me feel seen rather than evaluated. There was a calmness about her that made everything around her slow down. I fell for her faster than I expected. Our relationship progressed quickly, but it didn't feel rushed. We made plans without hesitation, spoke about the future casually, as if it were already waiting for us somewhere ahead. There were no games, no uncertainty, no dramatic push and pull. I mistook that steadiness for permanence. The first rupture came early. It was over something trivial, a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. The kind of disagreement most couples resolve with a conversation and a shared apology. Instead, Eva ended the relationship abruptly, and she did it publicly, in front of coworkers, her frustration spilling out in a way that left me exposed and humiliated. I remember the heat in my face more than the words she used. At first, I stayed at my job. I told myself I was mature enough to handle it, that running away would only prove I couldn't cope. But seeing her every day reopened something I hadn't realized was still bleeding. Healing doesn't happen where the wound keeps being touched, and eventually I accepted that. So I left. Months passed. We lived close enough that we ran into each other occasionally, at the grocery store, at a cafe, once at a bus stop during a sudden rainstorm where either of us had an umbrella. Conversations resumed slowly, cautiously. She apologized, not once, but repeatedly, acknowledging how immature her reaction had been, how ashamed she felt about the public scene she caused. She seemed sincere. And I wanted to believe her. Against my better judgment, I agreed to try again. By the beginning of the following year, we were officially together once more. This time, we told ourselves we would be more careful, more intentional. The truth was that comfort returned quickly, sliding back into place as if it had never left. Familiarity has a way of disguising unresolved cracks. A year later, everything looked right from the outside. We talked about marriage seriously. About buying a place together. About building something stable, something lasting. For the first time in my life, the idea of permanence didn't scare me. I decided to propose. I wanted it to be a surprise. I didn't tell her what I was planning. I picked up extra hours at work, sometimes coming home late, sometimes too exhausted to talk much. I began saving aggressively, quietly researching housing options, imagining the moment I would finally tell her everything I had been working toward. In my mind, I was sacrificing the present for our future. What I didn't understand was how absence feels to the person left behind, especially when they don't know why it's happening. I missed dinners. I stopped suggesting weekend plans. I was physically present but mentally elsewhere, always calculating, planning, worrying. I believed love could withstand temporary distance if it led to something solid on the other side. I believed silence could be an act of devotion. I was wrong. One evening, she told me she wanted a break. Not a breakup. Not an argument. A break. The words sounded gentle, almost considerate, as if it were meant to soften what it actually implied. When I asked why, her answers were vague. She spoke about feeling disconnected, about uncertainty, about needing space to think. Around the same time, I noticed something else. She had been mentioning a guy at work frequently, casually at first, then with increasing regularity, until she stopped mentioning him altogether. The silence around his name was louder than any confession. I confided in a close friend, Nora, who still worked at the same company. At first, she didn't know much, but she promised to ask around discreetly. When she called me back a few days later, her tone had changed. Eva had been telling coworkers that I seemed distant, that I wasn't emotionally present. Some of them encouraged her to step back, suggesting she deserved more attention. A few even hinted she might be happier with someone who was more available. When I told Nora about the proposal, about the house, about everything I had been quietly building, there was a long silence. Then she apologized. Not because she had betrayed me, but because she realized how completely the situation had been misunderstood. 2 weeks later, Eva asked to meet. I agreed, but I told her I needed honesty. Not reassurance. Not comfort. The truth. She told me she felt abandoned. That my absence made her doubt whether I truly wanted a future with her. I told her that if she had spoken to me instead of pulling away, she would have understood exactly why I had been working so much. Then she mentioned the new guy. I said his name before she could finish the sentence. The look on her face told me everything I needed to know. She insisted she hadn't cheated. I told her that searching for someone else the moment things become uncomfortable feels like betrayal, even if nothing physical happens. Something inside me settled in, quietly and irrevocably. I told her I was done. Not because I hated her. Not because I wanted revenge. But because I knew I couldn't rebuild trust on a foundation that had cracked twice. The breakup hollowed me out. I couldn't stay in that city. Every street held a memory. Every familiar place felt heavy. I asked my employer for a transfer and used the money I had saved for our future to start over somewhere new. A new apartment. New routines. A city where no one knew her name. I blocked her everywhere. Not out of cruelty, but out of self-preservation. Months passed. When I returned home for the holidays, friends organized a party to reconnect everyone who had moved away. Eva was there. We exchanged a brief greeting and nothing more. But when I saw her smile across the room, it pulled something loose inside me, something I thought I had buried. That frightened me more than anger ever could. Later that night, I learned her relationship with the coworker had lasted only a few months. It didn't bring satisfaction. Only sadness. Not long after, I discovered she was moving to my city. Coincidence, perhaps. A family connection, maybe. But when she began appearing unexpectedly, at the park, along my usual running route, it stopped feeling accidental. When she tried to talk to me, I told her calmly that I couldn't. She accused me of holding on to resentment. I told her the truth, that it wasn't anger keeping me away, but pain. That reopening a wound doesn't help it heal. Some friends said I was being cruel. Others said closure was necessary. They didn't understand that sometimes closure is simply choosing not to reopen a door. Eventually, her parents reached out. They apologized for her behavior, for the pressure, for the discomfort she had caused. We spoke quietly, respectfully. They told me she planned to seek therapy and promised to leave me alone. I wished her well. And for the first time, I meant it. I don't know where she is now. I don't need to. What I know is this: walking away doesn't always mean you didn't care. Sometimes it means you cared enough about yourself to stop bleeding in silence. I'm not dating. I'm not rushing. I'm learning which friendships respect boundaries and which ones disguise pressure as concern. I'm learning how to sit with quiet without trying to fill it. I'm healing. Slowly. Imperfectly. Honestly. Some stories don't end with apologies. They end with understanding. If this story felt familiar, you're not alone. Thank you for listening. This was Block Tales.